you have an entire group of people who know they are inferior, who know they will never be as intelligent, who know they will never get into an Ivy League school, who know they will never be an attorney, who probably have pretty fucked up relationships and know they will never be in a loving relationship, who know that they will never be elegant and refined and dignified. And because they know they will never be all those things, they are then angry that how is it that a Black woman of all people on this earth could be all those things, and they cannot stand it. This is why there is this fixation on Michelle Obama and this desire to minimize her and to masculinize her in the way that they continually do. And it's also a way in which they can insult Obama by saying that he then is with a man and not with a woman. When actually, last I checked, it was Donald Trump in the Epstein files with allegations that he was performing fellatio, is a nice way of putting it, on other men, including Bill Clinton. So feel free to say what you say, but do not clutch your pearls when people remind you of who you are. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Fearless Politics. Today we're going to delve deeply into the trailer park drama that happened at the White House over the weekend for Trump's birthday under the guise of celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States of America. We all know that the Independence Day, quote unquote, is July 4th. So let's just call a thing. That was a birthday celebration for Donald Trump. But something happened at that birthday celebration that stole the show. And I have a sneaking suspicion that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Roll the tape.
Michelle Obama is a man. Am I right, America?
Okay, so there are a couple of things that I want to address about that specific statement, the context around it, and the aftermath of it. So, number one, what most people are not realizing is that the heat of that moment happened after he had just defeated a Black man in the ring. You cannot tell me that that did not have something to do. It's like this racist adulation of defeating this big, imposing Black man in this most brutal of sports, that the best way he felt to celebrate was then to go and immediately insult a Black woman who he's calling a man when he just physically beat up a Black man. I mean, there are layers upon layers upon layers into this. Number one, for me, it kind of reminds us of who we are dealing with here. This is the heart of MAGA mania. This is the heart of the MAGites, okay? It is overrun by disturbing, disgusting, openly racist and violent hicks whom this president has attracted, and you attract what you are. Yes, Trump has now become a billionaire, I would argue, because of the presidency. But class and wealth are not necessarily aligned. Yes, this is someone who was born into wealth. He's also someone who is the son of a Klansman. Let's just put that out there. He is also someone who has a history of not wanting to rent to Black people. He is also someone who specifically called for the deaths of Black boys who were found innocent of a crime that was a horrendous crime, but at the end of the day, they were found innocent and released from prison because they were wrongfully imprisoned based on a crime that they did not commit. And he is someone who to this day still has not stepped down from his rallying up of hatred towards these young men who were convicted of a crime that they did not commit. He is someone who to this day continues to be obsessed with the Obamas to the point of sickness. I mean, literally today at the G7 summit, he insulted President Obama in the most disturbing and disgusting way. And so here we are on the night in which they were celebrating his 80th birthday. And you have this idiotic man in the middle of this ring insulting Michelle Obama. Now, if you look at that video again, you will see that Joe Rogan, who is holding the microphone, smiles. He laughs. He doesn't say anything to counteract that moment. In addition, days have gone by since then, not a peep from the White House around that disgusting moment. So this shows you exactly who they are, and it shows you who they attract. This is the epitome of trailer park racist culture. And it is the epitome of the type of people that not only surround Donald Trump, it is the epitome of who Donald Trump is. Donald Trump may be a billionaire, but he is in his soul trailer park racist trash. And this is why he enjoys trailer park racist trash talk like this was. Now, I also find it interesting that they have become so comfortable insulting Michelle Obama, because the insults did not end with that, of course. If you have any presence on social media at all, you can see the echoing of that insult. You also saw the foreshadowing of that insult with the memes and the pictures that have flooded the internet for years and that now have also been revived in the wake of this insult. And I think one of the reasons why they have become so comfortable insulting Michelle Obama this way is because they understand that nothing will happen to them as a result. Not only will they not be called out for it, they're not going to have anybody that's going to match their energy around that. Because what I find very interesting here is that why would you feel so comfortable insulting Michelle Obama, a very learned, a very dignified, a very intelligent, a very beautiful Black woman, when the natural thing for me to do would be to compare her to Melania Trump? So how about we do a little bit of that comparison, shall we? Now, I will say this. Michelle Obama is someone who obviously can run intellectual rings around Melania. She's someone that has worldwide influence and adoration, something that Melania Trump will never have. I remember when her first book came out several years ago, I happened to be traveling to Tanzania and Zanzibar for a work/vacation type of getaway. And during that time, I changed my flights in Holland. I had a layover at the Dutch airport, which I would have to say 10 out of 10, highly recommend. One of my very favorite international airports, writ none. And as I'm walking around that airport, which is more akin to a very high-end mall, quite frankly, as I'm walking around that airport, window shopping, going into different stores, I walk by this bookstore that literally the entire front of the bookstore, in the window, beckoning people to come in the bookstore to buy, was only multiple copies of Michelle Obama's book. Her book took up the entire window space of that bookstore in the Dutch International Airport. A large bookstore that had numerous books in there. So they could have put multiple books in the front to get people to come in to peruse their bookstore, but they only had her book there. Let's just say something like that will never happen to Melania Trump. Never. Never. Now, let's also compare Melania Trump to two-time Ivy degree holding attorney, Michelle Obama, in addition to being a former first lady, compared to Melania Trump, who inexplicably got here on an Einstein visa when allegedly the only thing that she did in her home country of note was to become a high-class call girl. Yes. So we're comparing a two-time Ivy League degreed woman to someone whose only professional ability that we all know of is being a high class call girl and a porn model. Someone who has a multitude of pornographic images that are so disturbing that you cannot even put them on social media without them being deleted because they violate their pornographic rules. So apples to apples comparison, I don't think there's much of a comparison there. Okay, let's if we want to talk about first ladies, let's talk about them. But I'm dealing with fact. They're dealing with fiction. Okay. So in addition to the fact that she has this very sordid past, and by the way, this is no diss to sex workers. I personally think that sex work should be legalized in this country, for example. I think it would be much safer for all involved. It could be taxed. I'm not going to sit here and judge a person who is in the sex industry. If you're an adult and you choose to do that to make a living, that's your business. I have no problem with that. But let's not act like that's not who Melania Trump is and was, because it is. All right. And if she wouldn't have met Donald Trump or somebody else to pull her out of that, she'd still be doing that for as long as humanly possible, because that's her only skill set. Let's also consider the fact that how many years has she been here and she still can't speak English worth a damn? Say what? I'm serious. She still can't speak English. She mangles the English language. Somebody teach her about subject-verb agreement. Do you remember during the first administration when she came up with her signature program, Be Best? What the hell is that? Be Best? That didn't even make sense, Melania. That is not even proper English, Melania. What the hell does that even mean? Next, let's talk about the fact that anytime she speaks, her accent is so thick. I swear I need closed captions on my television if I'm trying to really understand what the hell she's saying anytime she's behind a microphone saying something, because nobody can understand what the fuck she is saying. How long has she been here? And she hasn't put in the energy to learn the language. And it's so ironic that she gets away with that within an administration that is doing everything possible to rip the human rights away from immigrants to this country, placing them in spaces where girls come up pregnant. And we know what that means. They're being raped, where people have died, where families are being ripped apart, all because they committed the crime of being an immigrant. And here she is, clearly an immigrant, and has not put as much effort as 90% of them have put into actually learning how to speak English. It is really interesting. Let's also add, where is Melania? Where is Melania? Now, she was there on that night. She makes her appearances every now and then, but let's get real. She doesn't live in the White House. She doesn't sleep in the bedroom with Donald Trump, allegedly. So my question is, who the hell is she sleeping with? It ain't you, Donald. So is this part of all the Obama hate that we're getting? Because those two actually have a marriage that is not a business agreement. Those two actually love and respect each other, unlike whatever the hell is going on in the Trump household. Those two are individuals who actually are the epitome of intelligence and class, which clearly has absolutely nothing to do with either Melania Trump or Donald Trump. And it also has to do with why I believe Michelle Obama is constantly attacked in this way. In addition to the reality that as a Black woman, Black women have always been sectioned off into specific boxes in this racist society, right? We're either this hypersexualized Jezebel that gives people the feeling that it is okay to rape us. Honestly, something that's been a normalcy in this country ever since the very beginning, especially since the whole way in which people were deemed to be slaves under this chattel slavery system here is that you were a slave if you were born of a slave. So Black women's bodies became the means of production for the wealth of this nation. And those means of production became something that was also the playground for the slave owner. You know, when you're in this industry, you hear all sorts of stuff. People leaving you horrible messages, quote unquote, insults or attempted insults. And it's very interesting to me that oftentimes I hear from MAGA this assertion that I am white or am I white? And I have to remind them, no, I'm black, blackity black, black mixed with black. Okay. That's what I am. But I will also remind them that to the degree it confuses you, it's because somebody in your background raped someone in my background. So let's just acknowledge that fact. And so that dehumanization of Black women have been built into the fabric of this country, perceived as either this Jezebel where we could be raped and somehow it would be our fault. Sounds familiar? Perceived as this mammy, someone whose only purpose was to take care of your children and who themselves were a non-sexual being, but a nurturing being that actually made you feel okay and fixed your boo-boos and made you food and raised your children and even nursed your children. How lazy do you have to be to not even nurse your own damn children? Like, really? Or we're this hyper masculine being that because we're so masculine, we aren't allowed the ability to be perceived as dainty. And so we can be out in the fields doing the same work as a man day after day after day after day, right beside our men and not being paid just like our men weren't paid for hundreds of years. So we know the roots of all that. But I would say that it's even more than that. In addition to that, what is also happening here is that you have an entire group of people who know they are inferior, who know they will never be as intelligent, who know they will never get into an Ivy League school, who know they will never be an attorney, who probably have pretty fucked up relationships and know they will never be in a loving relationship, who know that they will never be elegant and refined and dignified. And because they know they will never be all those things, they are then angry that how is it that a Black woman of all people on this earth could be all those things, and they cannot stand it. This is why there is this fixation on Michelle Obama and this desire to minimize her and to masculinize her in the way that they continually do. And it's also a way in which they can insult Obama by saying that he then is with a man and not with a woman, when actually, last I checked, it was Donald Trump in the Epstein files with allegations that he was performing fellatio, as a nice way of putting it, on other men, including Bill Clinton. So if anyone has a predisposition for actual men of the two, it seems like to me, allegedly, it would be Donald Trump. When you go deep down this lane, do you really want to go there if you are faced with individuals that will match energy? So I will say that, yes, feel free to say what you say, but do not clutch your pearls when people remind you of who you are. And with the specific receipts to show that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it's true. Unlike you. All right, so it doesn't stop there. It's been a very eventful week, has it not? I will say, speaking of Epstein, that allegation isn't the only allegation in the Epstein files related to Trump. And in fact, the Epstein files were in the news this week and last week for very different reasons. A new report came out last week in the New York Times that was an excerpt of a book that will soon be released around all of the finagling that has been going on in the White House to try to suppress the Epstein files. And let me tell you, whoo, Lord have mercy, it was juicy. Okay. It was juicy. All right. This report gives a blow by blow of what happened in the Situation Room when the advisors all around Donald Trump found out that they needed to do something about this. And what's really interesting about this is the fact that the Situation Room is supposed to be off limits to all recording devices. Hell, you can't even bring your cell phone into the Situation Room. And it's done like that so that people can have free flowing conversations and not worry about anyone recording those conversations. Now, before I tell you a little about what happened in there, interestingly, this report was followed by a report in Axios where they are saying that the White House is in shambles right now because they are afraid that someone actually did record these conversations, because what was brought to light in the New York Times article was so dead on in terms of what happened in that Situation Room. Let's go through there and just sort of pull up some of those specifics that I think you're going to find to be very, very interesting. Okay. So this report shared that in that Situation Room, there were multiple individuals that were going back and forth about what they should do about the Epstein files and that crisis, and how could they somehow suppress it. What's really interesting is that out of all the people in that room, J.D. Vance, of all folks, said, let's just release the files. Let's release them all. Let's have congressional hearings. Let's just go ahead and do all of that right now. Get it over with. Oh, really, J.D.? You just want to get it all over with. Well, clearly, the people in that room said, hell to the no, let's not do that. But it's interesting that he would suggest that, is it not? It's especially interesting that he would suggest that given what's in these files. So I'm going to read you a short little excerpt from this New York Times report that those people in the room knew was in the files, specifically implicating Trump in illegal activity in terms of having sexual contact with children. So it says in this report that Sarah Ransom, who was one of the Epstein victims, mentioned that she knew a girl in Epstein's sex trafficking ring named Jen, who she said had sex with Trump. Ransom also claimed that Jen, once again a child, had told her that Trump had a predilection for nipples and that he aggressively flicked and sucked hers. Ransom wrote that she had seen evidence when she shared a bathroom with Jen. They looked incredibly painful as they were red and swollen, and I remember wincing when I looked at them. Listen, that's just a little bit of what's in here, but suffice to say, this is criminal behavior. It's criminal behavior by the President of the United States related to his activity with Jeffrey Epstein. And his own vice president wanted to release that. You know what I find very interesting here? If there are tapes, and once again, the White House is in a panic that there are potentially tapes. If there are tapes, guess what? The fire is coming from within the house, okay? If there are tapes, it's because someone in his inner circle was recording. And if I had to guess as to who it likely was and who has the most to gain, it would be J.D. Vance. Just think about it. First thing, he's the vice president. So if Trump were to go down, he would assume the presidency, number one. And number two, even if Trump does not go down because of this, he needs to position himself in a way that will distance himself from the president, not only because of the criminal activities that are alleged in the Epstein files, but also because of the fact that we are still today dealing with an economy that absolutely sucks. Approval ratings on the economy are at historic lows. In addition to that, you have someone who entered a war that he did not have to, has brokered this deal that he's so proud of he won't show anybody, and that from all reports that we see actually ends up putting America, at least, in a much worse position than the Obama deal. A war that, by the way, you had J.D. Vance come out and say that he was against going into in the first place. He is making these very public stances that he's against these things that are very unpopular, like the war. He made this private suggestion to release all of these materials in which you have multiple references to Donald Trump, some of which are specifically related to illegal behaviors. And so who would have the most to gain? It's got to be Vance. If there is a rat in the White House right now, if there is a leak in the White House right now, if there is someone in the White House right now that is working with these authors to give them this level of detail about that meeting that specifically implicates Trump in illegal activity, who else would it be but Vance? And I think Trump realizes that. I think he realizes that he can't trust Vance, which is why he has Vance out here making a fool of himself, trying to sell this ridiculous MOU that Trump is trying to position as a peace deal instead of even having the Secretary of State do it. Why is Vance out there in the media trying to explain why they've agreed to make sure that Iran has access to $300 billion post this war? Why is Vance out there trying to explain why they are now going to end any sort of sanctions on Iran post this war? Why is Vance out there sharing or having to defend these dirty details that are way more generous to Iran than anything that they experienced under the Obama deal? While Trump doesn't have to account for it, nor does the Secretary of State. He's out there doing the dirty work. And I believe that Trump is making him do the dirty work to try to dirty him with this, because he understands that Vance wants to run for president, and therefore Vance has an incentive to try to distance himself from all of these very unpopular things. So instead of allowing him to have that distance, Trump, being who he is, wants to sabotage Vance's ability to succeed him. I guarantee you that is what's going on right now. And so here we are in this situation where you have a White House who is panicking because of these new Epstein allegations that are coming out. And guess what? The whole book isn't even out yet. That is just the excerpt that they shared with the New York Times prior to releasing the book. Wait until the whole book comes out. Wait until we see whether or not there are actually tapes. Let me just tell you, if there are tapes that share information like this, and even worse, this is going to make Watergate look like a traffic ticket. This could very well be the end of the Trump presidency. We can all hope for that, right? So let's talk about this Iran deal. Now, first of all, let's just recognize the fact that this really isn't a deal. This is a memorandum of understanding. So this is an agreement to work towards a deal at best. And what I find most interesting about this is that it has been publicized that Iran has secured the services of 2 different psychologists that would help them in the negotiations, because they needed help with negotiating with someone who they believe is mentally ill. And so it's very interesting that because of their belief that Trump is a malignant narcissist, that they hired psychologists that would help them be able to negotiate with someone with that illness. This deal is made in quick order after they do that. And I think it was really a brilliant move, because by hiring those psychologists, they were able to give them suggestions as to how to position this to Trump to make it feel like he was in fact winning, to placate his narcissism. So it was really smart to use these psychologists to help them obviously figure out how to position what they wanted in a way to make Trump believe, at least, that he won, when everyone who's looking at this deal right now in terms of what has leaked out, people both on the left and the right, are saying absolutely not. You didn't win, Trump. Actually, this is like an unconditional surrender for America. This is going to put Iran in a much better situation than they've been in decades, honestly. Here we are where you have a deal that has provided, once again, deal in air quotes, according to Bloomberg, provides the following gifts to Iran. It lifts U.S. sanctions against Iran, something that had been in place literally for years. It provides them right off the top the right to sell their oil immediately. That is huge because that provides an ongoing source of significant revenue to this country, which is going to allow them to really become a huge player in that part of the world. After this, people are going to be like, Saudi Arabia, who? Dubai, what? This is a new positioning of Iran in that space that is going to create almost superpower-like status for them in the Gulf region. Next, they are to receive a $300 billion development fund to rebuild the country. Once again, $300 billion with a B. In addition, the U.S. agrees to release and make fully available Iran's frozen assets. That's another $24 to $100 billion. Another key point is that it specifically calls for the end of the war on Lebanon on all fronts immediately. And of course, Bibi is not agreeing to that. He's already come out to say, I ain't going to do it, because we all know what his plans are. The king of colonizers wants to go ahead and colonize Lebanon too. And about the nuclear weapon issue, the agreement is that Iran, and I quote, reiterates its stance about not seeking a nuclear weapon. And that's a very important wording there, reiterates its stance. It reiterates its stance because they had already agreed to that under the Obama agreement. So there's no gain here at all. In fact, according to the draft that was released by Bloomberg, the MOU does not address the state of Iran's uranium stockpile at all. Something to be negotiated at a later date. So Trump is running around here saying it's all about nuclear weapons. It's all about nuclear weapons. He hasn't advanced that at all. If anything, the core issue around their future capabilities with regards to uranium is not even included within this memorandum of understanding. It's just an understanding that we'll talk about this later. I quote, the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States agree that, pending a final agreement, they will maintain the status quo. Iran will maintain the status quo on its nuclear program, and the United States will not impose new sanctions on Iran or strengthen its forces in the region. So it looks like America capitulated on everything. The only thing the U.S. gains at all is that the straits are reopened. And guess what? They were opened for free in the first place. So if anything, Iran has come out of this much better, much stronger, much wealthier, and much more of a player and superpower in that region than ever. Israel knows not to fuck with them. You see how they're continuing bombing Lebanon because Lebanon, quite frankly, can't directly defend themselves to the degree that Iran can. But Iran is helping Hezbollah, however, not to the degree that they would be defending themselves. Understood? So Israel understands we better not fuck with them because guess what? They can shoot back. In addition to that, you have all the other Gulf region countries that got hit who were hosting U.S. bases. There is an estimate of 16 different U.S. bases that have been obliterated because of this. And what I find interesting here is in this agreement, the U.S. has agreed to not strengthen its forces in the region. What does that mean? Does that mean that we're not even going to build them back? We'll not even have a presence there in the future? Oh, okay. So who won? Who won? Sounds like to me this is a complete and utter victory for Iran in any way that you can look at it and shape it and interpret it. This is a full-fledged victory for Iran. Trump looks like the idiotic fool that he is. And the sad thing is, hundreds of people have died. You've had people struggle here for months under the weight of oil prices. that were significantly escalated, we're not going to completely get that issue resolved in terms of all of the mitigating effects of that for months. Even if the straits were to open tomorrow, which is not, according to this agreement, it's going to take at least another 30 days before it opens. But we've missed a key window here in terms of planting season and the ability of ships that have and things that are needed in order to be able to grow crops for the world's populace. There may be lagging effects related to this that could cause significant hunger around the world because of this incident that did not have to happen at all. And so here we are still in a situation where we'll have to deal with after effects of this for months. For months. And for what? To get straits open that were already open prior to the initiation of this conflict in the first place. Makes absolutely no sense. All right. So, big question then. If you started a war that didn't need to start, costing billions of dollars, creating havoc on people's pocketbooks at home because of the escalating price of everything. If you are in a situation where the economy writ large is horrible, and in fact, because of it, you are facing record-breaking disapproval ratings related to the economy. In fact, let me pull this up. Trump's approval rating on the economy right now has hit an all-time low of only 29%. And this comes from the Economist and YouGov poll. And in addition to that, they found that only 14% of Americans thought that the economy was going to get better in the months to come. The overwhelming majority thought the economy was going to get worse. So if you're facing statistics like that, and you understand the fact that you are still having to figure out how to get out of a war that you shouldn't have gotten into. And by the way, one last thing I want to say about the war. Why get out of it? Why now? Why agree to this? Like, because this is something that's clearly significantly worse than the Obama agreement from an American standpoint. Why would you do it? Here is my belief. My belief is that he agreed to these conditions in order just to have something that he could announce on the very same day that Obama opens the presidential library. He wanted to be able to find a way in which he could Bigfoot the coverage of the opening of Obama's presidential library in the media. And so I believe he would have signed anything in order to be able to stage a signing in Switzerland on the same day of the Obama presidential library opening. And he did it. He signed something. He scheduled it for the very same day as the Obama presidential library opening, but it's something that is being ridiculed from every corner. It's something that is clearly in every possible way a worse agreement than what Obama brokered, without one person dying, without billions of dollars wasted. It's something that clearly shows him to be the inferior person that he is. But at least he gets that moment of media attention that Obama won't have, because he'll be sitting there signing an agreement that makes him out to be the fool that he is. Congratulations. Congratulations. All right. So if you're living in a situation where you've done all of that, clearly that's going to hurt your party at the polls in November, right? Clearly that's not a good thing for the midterms. So what do? You do everything humanly possible to rig it. And that's exactly what's going on now. Let's think about all the things that Trump is doing right now, right before our eyes, to try to rig this election. And I think it's important to really pull all the things together, because so much is happening with this administration. I mean, one thing I will say, the Steve Bannon methodology of creating chaos, of flooding the zone, of doing so many things all at once that people can't really keep up with all of it, is a brilliant strategy. And so because of that, in the midst of everything that's going on, you probably don't know all the things that he's doing in order to rig this election, which he knows is absolutely necessary, because when he loses control of the House, and potentially the House and the Senate, he knows the investigations that will come. He knows the congressional hearings that will come. He knows the fact that he may very well be impeached again. And especially if these Epstein file recordings come out, oh, hell, he's going to hell in a handbasket. He knows that. So he's doing everything he can in order to save him from that fate. And when I say everything that he can, I mean everything. Let's take a look at all the different things that he's doing right about now. Obviously, we know about the redistricting effort. We know most recently he's gotten a huge assist from the Supreme Court with regards to the Calais ruling, but that's not all. Remember, this all started prior to the Calais ruling with him calling his little friend, Mr. Hot Wheels Gov in Texas, where he was saying, hey, I need more seats, in which they went ahead and obliged him, redistricted right immediately, and ultimately provided with him 5 additional seats. But they were not the only ones. In addition, you've had seats added in Florida, in Ohio, in North Carolina, in Missouri, in Louisiana, in Alabama, in Tennessee, for a grand total of 16 new seats that have been added in this off-year period, which in and of itself is completely counter to norms, right? Normally, redistricting only happens as a result of a new census. But no, he's trying to rig the representation in the House of Representatives to give him a bit more of an advantage during the midterms. Now, what have the Democrats been able to do? The only state that's been successful on the Democratic side with adding seats prior to the midterms has been California. Shout out to Governor Newsom. Is it any wonder right now that he has sicked the Department of Justice, the IRS, on Governor Newsom and his wife? Absolutely not surprising at all. And how ironic that he is sicking them on them around supposed IRS violations when he just himself negotiated a deal with the Justice Department to save himself and his family from ever having any sort of enforcement or any sort of power used against him and his family with regards to the IRS. But ironically, he wants to inflict the power of the IRS against the governor of California and his wife, the only Democratic governor in the nation that's been successful in helping to in some way combat what the Republican Party has done with stealing all these seats. There has been an additional seats that's been added, I believe was in Utah as a result of a court order. But altogether, then that means that there are 6 Democratic seats that have been successfully added as compared to 16 Republican seats, giving the Republicans a net 10-seat advantage going into November. Okay? But that's not all. Last week, you had the FBI raid an Ohio nonprofit that focuses on registering Black people to vote in Ohio. You had this particular raid occur not only at the main offices, they were following people at their home, like knocking down doors at their homes, questioning people at home about their voter registration activity. What is this? This intimidation at the highest level. This is the intimidation and the targeting of organizations that are working out here to make sure that every eligible voter is able to vote. They don't want that to happen, so they are targeting those organizations and they are intimidating the people that work within those organizations. But that is not all. In addition to that, they are threatening to end the delivery of ballots. So mail-in voting they are going after. In fact, they are putting pressure on states across the nation and saying that those states would then risk losing the U.S. Postal Service's delivery of mail-in ballots. They're saying then that they will not deliver the mail-in ballots of states who themselves do not first turn over their voter list. Why is that important? Because what they want to do is they want to purge people from the voter list. They are leaving no stone unturned when we're talking about trying to steal this election. Next, they are still trying to pass the SAVE Act. They have not given up on that. Lord have mercy. One thing I will say about Trump, he's relentless. He don't give up on shit, okay? He's like the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps on ticking, okay? Am I conflating things here? Is that the Energizer Bunny or a watch? I don't even know. But the point is, he keeps going. How many ways has he tried to pass the SAVE Act? I lose count. Okay. But right now he's trying to insert it into an extension for the FISA bill, and that's related to foreign intelligence surveillance. That is something that has to be passed, typically is passed because it relates to the protection of the nation, but he's trying to insert the SAVE Act in there. And just to remind you, the SAVE Act is about making it more difficult for married women to vote. If your married name, for example, does not match the name on your birth certificate, then guess what? You can't vote. It's about making it more difficult for individuals of all types to be able to prove that they are a voter. It's not about voter ID, which they are lying and trying to say it's about voter ID. They want proof of citizenship, which they would only accept then passports or birth certificates. And the vast majority of Americans do not have passports. Also, many people have a hard time, may not even have their original birth certificate. Let's also remind ourselves that older African Americans in this country weren't even given birth certificates when they were born. My grandmother, on her tombstone to this day, is our best estimate of when she was born. Because when she was born, this nation did not produce birth certificates for Black people. So elders within the Black community may not even have birth certificates to give as proof. So they're doing everything they can to make it difficult for Americans to vote. Luckily, it appears that the Republican leader in the Senate is saying, hell no, I'm not going to do this. But they're going to keep trying every way that they can, trust and believe. And so here they go, doing the things that they always do, trying to make it harder for people to vote. But that's not all. That is not all. I want to remind you that they've already seized the ballots of the 2020 elections from both Georgia and Arizona, specifically focusing on key areas that have a disproportionate representation of people of color. And my question to you is, do you think they might be thinking about doing it again? If they've been able to seize these ballots from the previous election and hold on to those ballots, what makes you think they might not try to do it again? I do not put it past them that they wouldn't try that again in 2026. And finally, they just last week disbanded the Department of Justice's Election Integrity Unit. Why would you do that at all? But also, why would you do that right before the election? Why would you disband an election integrity unit at all unless you were trying to hold elections that were devoid of integrity? Let's just remind ourselves of who this is. This is a crook. He's a criminal. He is someone who is already a felon 2 times. What makes you think he's not doing everything he can to engage in criminal activity again, but this time around the elections? I think the case is clear. We in danger, girl. And if we are to fight back, we need to do everything we can to start that process right now. I'm happy to say that the Democrats did hold a hearing specifically around election integrity. But beyond that, there needs to be everything done at the state level possible in order to ensure its citizens that their votes are going to count. And lastly, the thing that we all can do, as I always remind you, is to come out and vote at historic levels come the midterms. If we overwhelm the polls, we can win by such margins that all of the shenanigans that they're playing right now won't even matter. And with that said, go out here, enjoy yourselves this weekend. Happy Juneteenth to all. And then I'll see you next time for another episode of Fearless Politics. See you soon. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Fearless Politics.
And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and leave that 5-star rating that you and I both know we deserve. Also, feel free to leave a review so more people can find out about us and become members of the Fearless Politics crew. And finally, if you want to go further down the rabbit hole with us, then be sure to check us out at fearlesspoliticspodcast.com or connect with me personally on Instagram at fearless.Dr.Avis. With that said, we'll see you next time. And don't forget, it's time to be fearless. See you soon.